award-winning Tennessee Wildcast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee Wildcast. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching, for listening. Another great show lined up for you today. We're still at the Region 3 office, so we've had a great round of shows here, and we got one last one for you. It's going to be a great one. We're talking about musky today.
That is a very cool topic. I'm excited for this one. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I heard Mr. Mark Thurman give this presentation at the commission meeting a few months ago, and I thought, that'd be a fun show. We need to get him in here. So I came to him. We're in his territory here, and it's going to be a fun conversation.
So Mark, the Region 3 Fisheries Program Manager, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here today and talk about musky.
Musky.
Yeah, a big fish, fun to catch, I hear. I haven't had an opportunity to go after them. I want to very soon.
You need to get out there.
Yeah. So and they're also called what? Jackfish?
They go by a lot of different names, and regionally they have different names. In this area, they were known as jackfish. And it's still today. You know, you'll meet people that fish for them in this area, and they're after jackfish. So it's kind of interesting.
Interesting. That may be the title of the show.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole show on fish names.
That would be a good one.
Yeah. Well, what is it they call a fisheries biologist?
Oh, fish head.
All kinds of names.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into it. I guess let's start off with learning about Mark. You've been on the show before, but give us a background of yourself and your work with the agency.
Okay. Well, I've worked with the agency since 1986. Started my career in fisheries. I spent some time in our biodiversity division working on state wildlife action plans and conservation planning, and then worked my way back to fisheries in my current position as a fisheries program manager, and manage the Region 3 Fisheries Program. We cover a 24-county area where we're managing fisheries in big reservoirs, small impoundments, all the streams, all over the place. We've got people out there working on managing fisheries and fishing for the public.
Awesome.
No small feat, huh?
No. For sure. While you were talking, I remember I was thinking back the time we worked together on the Roaring River, and pulling out that Lowhead Dam and creating better flow and better fishery there. I just got back. We went and fished there a few weeks ago. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So
that was a neat project, wasn't it?
It was.
See the change. And so you've gone back and you've seen with that dam gone and kind of the river return to its just natural form. It's pretty neat to see.
Yeah, I remember Mark saying you don't often gain habitat when it comes to water.
No.
But his work in the removal of that, and I know it wasn't just your work, but you were really big.
No, there were a lot of partners in that, but that was a cool project.
Yeah, but you were big in the implementation and seeing that through and gaining habitat for fish. And I know more studies have gone on there to look at the movement of fish, but we'll get to that another time. I want to jump in and I want to learn about musky because it's such a neat fish, and there are some misconceptions about it that will eventually get here. But I want to start off with something, just asking the question, what would people be surprised to learn about your work? Because who's a fisheries biologist in life? I mean, really, there are so few, it seems. And I think what would people be surprised to hear about?
Well, it's like I said earlier, it's really neat work to be involved in. But I think one of the things, or many of the things that would surprise people about our work, my work, is all of the things that are taking place to manage fishing, to provide fishing opportunities. There are so many moving parts, and people in my program, our program, just all the time. There's always stuff going on, and it's so cool that people are out there enjoying fishing. And like for some of the hatchery supported fisheries, all the work that goes into getting those fish to the water. Sometimes I wish people knew how much work went into it, and all of our people are so dedicated
Boy, aren't they?
to doing the best job they can, and they do a wonderful job on all of this work. So I think that would surprise people, just what all goes on to manage fishing in Tennessee.
I love reflecting their passion, and it's so evident. I'll never forget, it was some little fish, and I don't know where we were in the region, but some little fish, and someone was like, let me see that. It has 3 scales between the eye, and they knew exactly what it was, because that knowledge is there and that passion is there. So I love that you talk about that. So much goes on behind the scenes. It's not just for our anglers, it's putting a hook in the water, but it's so much more than that for fisheries, Mark, and thanks for reflecting that. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think from the top down, I mean, even from our chiefs in our fisheries division down to the techs who are working on the lowest levels, care. They come to work because they care and because they want to make a better fishery.
Yeah, dissolved oxygen, water temperature, all these things, perseverance, all these terms get thrown out there within the agency, and they're just common vernacular to us. But the general public, I hope that's reflected, like, whoo, there's some work that's going on.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in with the muskie. It is a cool fish. And for me, I'm just going to admit it, kind of scary. Kind of Loch Ness Monster-ish.
You don't lip it like a bass, that's for sure.
It's the teeth. I mean, if you're going to talk about muskie, one of the things that you're going to think of first, it's the teeth.
So I want to hear about the natural history, everything about the muskie, but would you describe for someone listening?
Okay, the teeth. Let's start there.
The teeth.
We'll start at the front with the teeth again. But it's a long, slim fish. The colors of it can vary from just an olive base with really no markings to having vertical bars all the way through the body. That is kind of those fish with the vertical bars are really that's kind of tied in with the Ohio River Basin strain of muskie, which is what was native to here, and
Interesting.
They can get pretty big. They can get up to 50 inches, and are just a really prized sport fish. And it's kind of like walleye and brook trout, where people sometimes are surprised that those are native fish to Tennessee, but the walleye and the muskie, they were native to the Cumberland and Tennessee river basins.
Very cool. Tell us about that life cycle of that fish then.
Okay. So they're spring spawners. They'll make runs up rivers to spawning areas. They need clean habitat. They need clean gravel on the river bottoms. They associate with aquatic vegetation and woody debris. And so they'll start moving in March, and when water temperatures get in the low 50s, that's when their spawning period starts, and that's kind of when you'll see numbers of fish around each other. They don't build nests like a bass or a bluegill. They're spawning around habitat, and then after the spawning period, you see small fish out in early summer. You'll start seeing some small fish 4 or 5 inches long, and then they move on through their life history.
So I would assume, like other fish, it's really dependent on how much they eat, water temperatures, as to how quickly they grow.
Sure.
But when we talk about a 50-inch fish, a toothy 50-inch fish, how long would someone expect it to take?
Like with our regulations, we've got we have two types of regulations. We've got a trophy regulation, which is a 50-inch minimum length limit, 1 fish a day. And then we have a 36-inch length limit, 1 fish a day, which is our statewide regulation. And that's really targeted at that time when that species sexually matures and is able to spawn. And they can reach that size depending on those factors that you mentioned. 3 to 4, 5, 6 years, they can get into that range. And then those bigger fish, those are old fish. They can live to 20 years. And those bigger fish, once they get past that 36 inches, the growth slows down, and you start seeing a lot of overlap in the ages of the fish. But those big fish are old fish, fish that have been caught and handled properly and released in many cases. So yeah, just that's kind of their age structure and things related to the ages of those fish.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, people love to catch them. People love to chase them. It's the sport that people love. But do they eat them as well? I mean, you talk about taking them. There's a limit. So why is there a limit if people aren't eating them? Are they eating them?
People do eat them. Mm-hmm.
I've never had muskie. I don't know.
People do eat them. I think that's more of a historical thing.
Okay.
They're much more now. I think I saw it in a book where they're more for the wall than the table now.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that they're a food fish really. With those trophy limits, they're typically designed for places where we have self-sustaining populations that aren't hatchery supported. And they also, trying to think here, like those the longer length regulations, some of those are in place because of consulting with the people who are fishing for them. And that's how prized they are. It's like we don't want to harvest them, and we want to do catch and release, and we want to take care of these fish.
Well, that shows you where public input is welcomed, and we take that into effect when we're setting regulations and things like that.
When I first got in this job, we had a meeting here with a group of muskie anglers, and they came from all over the state to meet with us and talk about their experiences, to learn about the management that we have going on and have had going on, to learn about some of the history. And, it was where we had conversations about future management as well. So, engaging with our stakeholders is a big part of that process.
So, I mean, it's fascinating to think of a fish living that old, and I knew that, but it still amazes me. There's some misconceptions out there about what muskie are eating, and I want to learn about what are they eating, and how you all go about monitoring to ensure healthy populations, not just of muskie, but of Tennessee species.
Okay, well, I'll start with food habits. They're like a lot of fish. When they first hatch, they're eating inverts, and then by 3 to 5 weeks, they switch over to very small fish. As they grow, their preference for prey items, the size grows as well. As adults, they really prefer soft-rayed fishes like gizzard shad, red horse, suckers, and there is a lot of misconception about the kind of what they eat, and they eat everything, and they eat twice their weight every day.
If only I could.
But, just like our work, so in the places that we're managing muskie, we're also managing other species, and we're monitoring all those populations and keeping track of them. And we don't see negative effects with having muskie in the mix. So, in places where we've got rock bass and smallmouth, you see really good fishing for those as well. And that's the case across the state where we have muskie fisheries.
Yeah, I think that's important. No predator ever eats all of its prey.
Right.
There's a natural cycle that takes place, but you're monitoring, you're not seeing those impacts, and you're seeing what they truly do eat. So you touched on a little bit about natural reproduction, and I want to talk about that, but tell us about the distribution of muskie in Tennessee, and then we'll talk maybe a little bit about stocking and where that's taken place.
Okay. So the historical range, I mentioned earlier that they're native to the Cumberland and Tennessee river basins. In the Cumberland, there's pretty good evidence that they existed all the way down, towards the Harpeth River. In the Tennessee Basin, all the way down to the Chattanooga area along Walden's Ridge.
Yeah, that was new to me.
All the way down to Chattanooga.
Wow. That's cool. Didn't know that.
And a lot of that is all pre-impoundment, before all the big reservoirs were built. And of course, when those were built, that was a factor that kind of limited their distribution. and started having some impacts. And then now we've restored muskie to several places, like in the Caney Fork watershed, the Emery River watershed, where they're self-sustaining. You're not doing stocking work. The Del Hollow population was established in the 50s, and it's really only been stocked a few times. They're there.
Wow.
So that's that restoration success that we've had. And now we have active management going on as well in the French Broad watershed, in the Ocoee watershed, which is a fairly new fishery in our area here.
Very cool.
On Parksville Reservoir, and seeing some really positive benefits there or positive results. And then Melton Hill is one that's been, that's where the state record came from, and it's a known place on Melton Hill, and probably one of the early places where we saw this success in musky fisheries. So it's kind of an ongoing process. We've got places that we've got self-sustaining populations, and that's always a goal. Is if we can do that, that's great. And then we have places that we're still working on it.
That stocking, our state goes to tremendous efforts when it comes to ensuring fish are in the right place. When looking at genetics, we've talked about that with invasive Alabama bass and Florida bass. We go to extreme measures to ensure good science is put in place. Talk to us a little bit about that with stocking muskie from start to finish. What's that look like?
Well, it's like a lot of stocking processes and culture processes. It starts with obtaining brood stock from places.
Where do you get brood stock?
Right now with muskie, we use fish from Kentucky and their system. They've got a great hatchery system in place to raise muskie. We don't so much, but this is a kind of a side note. It's like there's a network in the Southeast of fish and wildlife agencies that have hatchery systems, and they all work together on things. And there are times when we can provide fish for them, and then in turn they provide fish for us. So our fish are coming from Kentucky for the most part. Some fish do come from North Carolina, and there have been some fish from the Midwest that have been brought in.
Do you ever collect from our own systems to use?
We haven't at this point, but we probably will. That's kind of on the horizon for us in terms of muskie management, understanding what genetics we have out there now, because historically we had Midwest fish introduced and stocked in places. The places that we're seeing the success, of self-sustaining populations has been using the Ohio River Basin strain of fish, and that's what Kentucky focuses on. So to get back to the process, you collect your brood fish, you bring them in, you spawn them out, you keep your fish and your hatchlings in a pond as long as you can, and then when it's time to move them, you start loading them up on hatchery trucks and getting them to the sites.
Fast as you can, right?
And these can range anywhere from, I've seen them as large as 11, 12 inches.
Wow.
And then as small as 7 or 8. But yeah, that's kind of, did I cover it? That's kind of in a nutshell kind of how things work. And it's like a lot of other species.
So I think you've touched on this too, but how are you determining at this point in time where to stock them? So we know you want them in the native range, but how are you all determining where you're going to stock a muskie?
We're definitely working off the native range, and we determine where to stock. Like I mentioned, the places that are self-sustaining, we've documented that we've got natural reproduction and seeing the small fish, so we're not stocking there. So that means because we don't have a ton of fish to work with, they're going into places where we're trying to establish fisheries. And so that's really it's up to really Region 3 and 4, Middle Tennessee to Upper East Tennessee falls within that range and are working on musky fisheries, and a lot of it's riverine habitat, although we've got some reservoir sites like Parksville I mentioned and Melton Hill. But that's kind of how that's kind of the process is us determining, letting the managers determine what the suitability is. Is the prey there, or is the public good with it? I know in recent establishing new sites, there's been some surveying of the public to understand what their attitudes were, and that's always important. That hasn't always been the case with all the fisheries, but that is a part of it.
And it probably makes sense that having a better understanding that they're not out there eating other sports fish necessarily.
Right.
And as people learn that, then they're more open to a new fishery and having something else to fish for.
I think so.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm watching our time, Jason.
Yeah.
There's so much we can dive into.
Oh gosh, we're running out of time. Thank you for watching.
But hey, let's jump down to just talking a little bit about that. How you're seeing the stocking of this fish in these historic ranges, and what that has meant to the communities around them.
Yeah, because people are wanting to catch them. People are coming down here to catch them, aren't they?
Oh, they are. That we have people coming from all over the country to fish here. Tennessee is a destination for a lot of species.
Yes.
Tennessee is great. Tennessee is the place to be.
We've got great wintertime fishing, so a lot of the folks in the Midwest and the Northeast looking for a break from winter can come down here and fish.
Yeah.
And it's the story that we see all over the state where, our fisheries have impacts on local economies. Places like McMinnville have branded themselves home of the Southern Musky. They host a fly fishing only tournament there. A group hosts a tournament there where people from all over the country come to fly fish for muskie and just have a big time down in the area. Seeing that kind of thing happen, and then even the ownership and the stewardship around the resource is a really neat thing to see. And it's happening in other places where people are realizing the value of those fisheries and trying to make sure that they capitalize on it with their branding. So, the McMinnville story is a neat story.
It is. It's a neat town to visit too.
Yeah. So, like the folks that are coming down here, they're coming during the winter, and you talked about spring spawn up here earlier in the show. When is the best time to catch these fish? Is it during that spring spawn? I know you mentioned not to fish those warmer days. It stresses the fish out maybe, or harder on the fish. But is it pretty much year round you can catch them?
Yeah, you can catch fish year round. I mean, if you've got fish actively spawning and you're somebody that's got an ethic around not taking advantage of that and letting them do their thing and leaving them alone, that's probably a good idea. But for the most part, it's kind of year-round fishing until you get to those summer months. If water temperatures get, mid 70s, upper 70s, and definitely at 80, time to back off.
Okay.
And muskie, people who fish for muskie are mindful of that. The people that are targeting those fish go to great lengths to keep them healthy as they're handling them and make sure that a released fish is a live fish.
Sure. Yeah, we mentioned it before we started, but like netting them, keep them in the net as long as you can, and different techniques that help them.
Yeah, keep them in the water
as
much as you can. If you're going to take a picture, be quick about it. Don't grab them by the gills.
Don't grab them by the teeth.
Yeah, don't grab them by the teeth. And there's a lot of information out there about how to handle those fish, and even at like some of our access points on places that we've got musky fisheries, we've got signage out there that tells people how to approach musky fishing so that a released fish is a live fish.
Yeah. And I guess you said mainly crankbaits and things like that, or maybe big jerk baits.
Oh gosh, I mean, it's baits bigger than this sheet of paper. They're really big baits. Even they're targeting big prey items.
Yeah.
And so people go after them with some big gear. And even, with the fly fishing stuff, there you see people.
Wow. A fly that big, really?
Yeah, they're huge.
Two-handed cast.
Yeah. You think they call them fish of 10,000 casts. You're going to have a pretty big arm after you're done there.
Yeah.
But,
Wow. And I guess one more question on fishing for them, the strike. I mean, if people are coming down here in the winter months, they must still be pretty active in the winter months. Bass kind of slow down their strike in the winter, but muskie still hit hard. Still, they're eating.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's still a fun fish to catch year round.
And they're hard hitting fish. I mean, I've heard people say it's the eat. It's that bam.
Yeah, it's the bite. Yeah.
But people do, if you're fishing for them, and a lot of times they're caught incidentally. But if you're targeting them, just be mindful of the time you're fighting them and try to get them in and get them back in the water.
So one of the things I know about McMinnville too is they do their annual cleanup, and you talked about muskie spawning and what their needs are. So I think a good thing to mention. Another thing that anglers can do to help is watch that water cleanliness.
Sure. I mean, we've got to have good habitat out there for good fisheries, and sedimentation is still an issue out there that impacts habitat, and having good healthy riparian areas that don't have a lot of holes punched in them and keeping the sediment out of the streams is really key to having good healthy fisheries. There are other factors that are involved, or other things that can influence it that are still related to land use around a river or a reservoir. And so, we always need to be mindful of what's going into the streams, because, again, you got to have healthy water for healthy fisheries.
Yeah.
So I want to touch base on the state record, and then we'll come back to maybe some information that we can find online. But tell us about that state record.
Came out of Milton Hill. And golly, I'm drawing a blank on the weight of the fish.
Oh, it's right there, right on the wall.
No, that was the previous.
Oh, that's the previous one. Okay.
Yes, that was broken after we got that made.
Wow.
But it was a behemoth. Yeah. It was a big fish. It was a beast.
So people can find more information on the muskie at tnwildlife.org. Any other information, like the signs that are at some of our ramps, just ask people to keep waterways clean and watch that safe handling and go after them.
Yeah, go after the fish of how many casts?
10,000 or so.
10,000 or so.
The jackfish of 10,000 casts.
You can move it. You'll enjoy moving a fish even. Just moving a fish is exciting.
It's getting me fired up. I think I will have to plan a trip and get some video of this, and it'll be fun to get out there and chase them. Mark, thank you for all you do. Thank you for your work you've put in since 1986. Man, you've been moving fisheries along since 1986. That's awesome.
It's a lot of fish.
Yeah. Well, appreciate your work. Appreciate you, Mimi, for helping line this up.
Fun. Thanks, Mark.
And,
you're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you guys for tuning in, for watching, for listening, for following us. Remember, our social media is out there: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Catch us on YouTube. And for all things wildlife, tnwildlife.org. This is Tennessee Wildcast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, it's all about Tennessee wildlife. It's what we do. Tennessee Wildcast will be on the air again next week. We'll see you then.